You are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke McKenna, but today's case is a survived story, how a whole town escaped a reign of terror. Now, this survival story involves multiple victims, but this isn't the usual crime case. With a whole town involved, you'd think someone would know something, that when a murder occurred, answers would be given. However, silence is all that has been heard. By the way, I post so much content like this. It is my absolute passion to tell these stories, and I mean no harm or disrespect when I do so. So if it's something you'd like to support me in doing, all you have to do is make sure you are subscribed with the post notification bell on, giving this video a thumbs up, and leaving a nice comment down below. Now let's get back to the story. So it was 1981 in Missouri, and Ken McElroy lived in a place called Skidmore. Now, this is usually where I talk more in depth about the victim. However, Ken is not said to be the main victim, even though he would be the one shot dead in his truck. But to explain more, I have to explain the emotions of an entire town and the fear that everybody had, which I simply cannot do. What I can do is explain what led up to this and make you feel the same emotions that they did. So I'm going to be telling you what this town endured after a Mr. Ken Rex McElroy was born. You see, he was born on June 1st, 1934 to the McElroy family. This was to parents Mabel and Anthony, and they were a poor farming family with 16 children in total. Now, Ken was actually the second youngest, so number 15, but they actually lived in Kansas when he was younger, and then they moved to Missouri. This was to the tiny town of Skidmore that had 437 residents in total. Unfortunately, all 400 of them would soon know about a little boy named Ken. Any family would be hearing from their own children about a bully at school who would steal lunch money and who was horrible to all of his classmates. Businesses in the area that were all pretty much family owned would be talking about a little boy who was coming in and shoplifting from their stores. The whole town knew this boy and his actions. This small town wasn't perfect, but they normally didn't have this big of problems, and it was often something that they could deal with. However, nothing was being done about Ken. By the time Ken was supposed to be headed to high school, his reputation was well known by all of his classmates, but thankfully, they wouldn't have to deal with him much longer. You see, during 8th grade, Ken actually dropped out and was said to not even know how to read or write. This is also around the time that he became acquainted with the local cops. You see, Ken was older now, and his sweet, childlike face that was thought to excuse him of all of this behavior prior was now gone. Ken didn't seem to be holding back his behavior now. However, he never really was thought to do so. It was just the fact that now, as a teenager, Ken could come up with much more elaborate plans, and he actually had much more time to act on them when he wasn't working at his family farm because he was no longer going to school. From his work at the farm, Ken also began to get muscles. He was an extremely strong boy, and unfortunately, everyone he came in contact was scared of him because he had no motive for who he was angry with and who he would bully. He just simply was angry at everyone. From what I could find, none of his other siblings acted this way. Out of 16 children, it was only one child. So this is why it was believed that this didn't have anything to do with his parents or the way he was raised, but possibly something deeper. There is another theory which we will get into in a little bit as to why he was the only one that acted this way. But at this point, Ken was not just stealing from shops. He was stealing cattle and supplies from other farmers as well as random things from the inside of residents' homes. Everyone knew who was responsible, and yet Ken wasn't getting in trouble. He also was said to have about 24 assault charges throughout the years, but the problem was anytime anyone got the courage to speak up about Ken, to go to the local law enforcement, he would actually begin threatening them until they backed down. They would have all the paperwork ready, they were going to press charges, go to trial, and suddenly the victims would say that they no longer wanted to press charges, they wanted nothing to do with it, and they completely backed out. This happened pretty much every time. Although, on the slight chance that it did go to trial, he was always found not guilty. And this was said to be because the jurors at this time in the 1980s were actually said to be written out in the newspaper. So everybody knew who the jurors were going to be for trials coming up. And this meant that Ken could find out who they were and could go and threaten them. By the time they arrived in court, there was no way they were going to find Ken guilty. Ken was now a grown man. It was years later. He was around 270 pounds and pretty tall. He also feared no one, but made everybody fear him. He was said to be very cunning. He knew exactly which people to target, which was the weak, and he made money. Well, it was said he liked to say he made money by leasing land, but he really made money by stealing, by racing and trading dogs, and by making sure that he was the one that had gasoline, antiques, and grain from everybody in town who had earned it, but instead he stole it. Ken McElroy also had a huge ego. Anytime someone would threaten to call the police, he would simply say to do it. He didn't fear them at all. He believed he could get away with anything because up until that time, that's exactly what happened every time. He did get away with it. Everybody in the community knew that if they charged him, he would bring in his big-time lawyer. This actually happened about 3 times per year, that he would bring in this lawyer to a court case that he was going into, and this lawyer was really good. His name was Richard Geen McFadden, and he was also said to defend members of this mob. So the fact that Ken was indicted on, 21 charges over the years was nothing to this lawyer. He knew what he was doing. As far as the police in the area, it was said that the closest police department to this tiny town of Skidmore was about 15 minutes away, and they would always get complaints about Ken. So at one point they did send out a marshal whose job was to look after Ken 24/7. That lasted one day. As soon as Ken caught word of this marshal being there for him, he went up and threatened this man. And he wasn't afraid at all. But now the marshal was afraid of him. And he called for backup, to which he was told there was going to be none coming, that he was going to have to deal with it himself. So hearing this, the marshal showed up the next day to the police department, turned in his badge, and quit. It was said that the law enforcement didn't want to deal with him because they knew Ken would shoot them without another thought. The fact that they were law enforcement didn't scare him. He didn't care about the law. He didn't care who it was. Even with his bad reputation, Ken still managed to find a wife. In fact, 3 of them, of course, throughout the years at different times. However, even in his relationships, Ken was found to make people disgusted. And this was because his 4th relationship would be with a woman he met in 1971 when he was 37 years old. But you see, she wasn't actually a woman. She was a little girl. She was only 12 years old. Her name was Trina, and they were together for around 2 years without Trina's parents knowing when she became pregnant. This proved he had had sex with a minor, and her parents were absolutely appalled, and they ended up pressing charges against Ken, accusing him of child molestation and statutory rape while their daughter was going through a pregnancy. Now, everyone in this town believed that if anything was going to put Ken behind bars, it was going to be this. The trial was coming up, and Trina actually gave birth to their baby, which was instantly taken into foster care to be looked after. 3 days until the trial, Ken then divorced his 3rd wife. That's right, if it wasn't disgusting enough for him to be being with a 12-year-old and getting her pregnant, he was still married at the time to his 3rd wife, who he then divorced. Then the unthinkable happened. well, for you and me. The people of this town knew things like this to happen all the time. However, Trina's parents, who Trina still lived with, were very much set on Trina not being involved with this much older man who had this horrible reputation. Trina was 15 at this time, so she was still living at home, and that is when their family home would catch on fire. When everybody got there to check out this fire to put it out, they found that the family dog had been shot and killed. Seeing this, they realized they needed to investigate this fire further, and sure enough, they found that it was arson. But instead of hauling Ken into the police station, the next day he was handed a signed paper by Trina's parents saying that they gave him consent to marry their daughter. So that is what they did. A day afterwards, they went to the next county over and they were married by the justice of the peace. This was said to be done because Trina's parents feared what he would do next and what could be done to their daughter if they didn't approve of this. Now Trina was his wife, and the charges against him were dropped because she couldn't testify against him as his wife, and because her parents signed this consent form, there was nothing to go to trial about, so everything was dismissed. At this time, since they were now married, Ken and Trina wanted their baby back. However, Ken wasn't going to do things the legal way. He never did. In fact, he found out where these foster parents were living. He showed up at their door and he threatened them, saying if they didn't give up his baby, he was going to go after their birth daughter and meet her when she got off the bus from school and kidnap her. And then they would be forced to trade their daughter for his. Now, hearing this is horrifying to me as a birth daughter of parents who did foster care for many, many years when I was younger. It wasn't the foster family's fault that this child had gotten taken away, and now I'm sure they lived in fear of what would happen to their own child. If you know anything about the foster care system, you may be thinking, well, it's not possible to handle things this way. They couldn't just hand over the baby, and you're right. However, the foster parents called the police, and Ken would be charged with intimidation. But we all know his luck when it comes to trials. The charges were dismissed again, and the baby was given back to Ken and Trina. Now, although birth parents can work towards being better parents for their children and doing the necessary things to get them back, why give custody back to a man who was accused of threatening a child to get his own child back, instead of just doing the necessary steps that every birth parent has to do to get their child back? Especially when the child's mother and his wife was only 15 years old. Now, 3 years later, in 1976, Ken and Trina had 2 more kids at this point, but he had about 15 in total, I believe. They were still together, they were still married. However, he didn't become the perfect family man like everyone hoped. He would actually often brag around town that he had tons of money, and it was at home, and he stashed it everywhere, and this was basically rubbing it in the faces of the people he had stolen from. He wasn't reformed in the slightest by his children or by his age. I mean, he was now 40 years old, and he still had the maturity that he had in the 8th grade. You know, maybe even the maturity of him younger than that. But it was July 26th, and Ken was away from his family. Around 5:30 p.m., a gunshot would be heard at a local farm. The owner of the property was named Romaine Henry, and he would be found with 2 bullet wounds to the stomach and 1 that grazed his head. Thankfully, Romaine made it back home to his wife, who could drive him to the hospital, and he survived. He decided to press charges against the man who had shot him because he knew him well. This was Ken. Romaine said he had heard gunshots on his property, and he got closer to make sure that this person wasn't shooting his cattle, and when he got closer, it was none other than Ken. He was in his pickup truck shooting his gun, just in the middle of nowhere, and when Romaine got closer, he got out of his truck and began to shoot at him. While doing so, Ken also yelled out that he didn't want to see Romaine snooping around his farm, yet he was on Romaine's farm at the time. Ken was finally going to be charged with assault with the intent to kill. His lawyer, whom everyone knew well, negotiated his arrest. Ken claimed he was innocent, that he was home at the time of the shooting because he was overseeing a construction project at his home. When officers talked to the construction workers, they claimed that was exactly what he was doing. So Ken was released on a $20,000 bail. When the time came for trial, Romaine was just happy to have gotten there alive. You see, what he couldn't mention at this trial was the fact that ever since Ken was released on bail, he had been at Romaine's farm with a gun, watching them and just staring at them every single day, threatening them for coming forward. By the end of the trial, Ken was found not guilty and had spent 1 day in jail. It was rumored that these jurors at the trial had been given a gift from Ken. There was a rattlesnake in their mailboxes, further threatening them and causing them to find him not guilty. 4 years later, it was now 1980, and Ken was doing something normal for once. His kids were growing up, and that July 8th, he went into the local grocery store. There was only this one grocery store that was family owned by the Bowenkamp family. This was a well-respected and loved family, yet when Ken walked out that day, 70-year-old Bo Bowenkamp would be shot in the neck inside the store. He barely survived, but he did, and he was able to tell officers exactly what happened. Once again, it had to do with Ken. But Bo said that it wasn't exactly from that day that it caused it. He said that Trina, Ken's wife, had come in with their 4-year-old daughter prior to this. And her daughter was holding a candy bar that they hadn't paid for and was about to walk out, so Bo asked her to put it back. He asked her very kindly to do so, and after this, Ken began to sit outside this grocery store and fire his gun into the air, threatening them. Trina had told him that the store owners had accused their daughter of shoplifting, and he started following them, and that was until the day he finally went into the store with a shotgun. The Bowenkamps said that they would never accuse anyone of shoplifting because they knew that they were in hard times. They said that because of all the threats and Ken constantly following them around, they actually had code messages that were being sent from people of the town to tell them when Ken was nearby their store to keep them safe. The whole town said when you didn't know where he was, you didn't dare take the chance of not being on your guard. Ken was finally arrested after being hunted down by Missouri State Highway Patrol Trooper Richard Stratton. He was charged with attempted murder because many witnesses were pointing the finger at him. A waitress even came forward saying that Ken had been talking about killing a grocery store owner because he was angry for what this grocery store owner was talking about. But the waitress didn't come forward because Ken always talked this way about killing somebody, about not liking how they treated him. He was always angry. She didn't think he actually meant it. But Ken was taken to trial, and everyone expected very little to come out of this because very little ever did. But he was found guilty of second-degree assaults and given 2 years. 2 years still wasn't much, but to this town it was something. However, his lawyer then appealed it the same day, and he was released on bond that same day. He continued his ways while being out on bond. He even threatened a local preacher who had gone to see Bo in the hospital, and he said if he ever did it again, he would be next. Ken also went to the bar and was talking to a waitress about the fact that he had been fighting the legal system his entire life, but he was now 50, and this was the first time that he had lost. He was basically throwing himself a pity party, but all everyone heard as he spoke was the fact that he had no remorse. The police department was bombarded with questions about how they could get this man locked away forever, how they could give him more than just 2 years if he was even going to get that. They said there was simply no answers known to give to them, so members of the community started going to the higher-ups. They went to the governor, the attorney general, state legislators, but no one would do anything. Ken was making threats around town at this time, saying he was going to finish off Bo, and everyone was terrified because they knew he would do it. The prosecutor did file Ken's bond to be rejected to get him back in jail immediately, but the community didn't think that this would actually cause anything to be done, so they were scared, they were terrified, they were fed up of living in survival mode. Quietly, they got as many people as they could to meet at Legion Hall in town. town. This was said to be on July 10th, 2 days after Bo had been shot, and about 60 people showed up at this meeting. This was across the street from the bar where Ken frequented that was called D&G. It was said that the sheriff and the mayor were at this meeting. However, there are no records of what happened or what it was for. No one but the people of the town know exactly what was said that day. Whether it was about Ken, no one knows, and no one will say. And that's because of what happened next. However, before we get into that, what they did know was that there was a theory on why Ken acted the way he did, and this went clear back into his childhood. You see, Ken was said to be riding a wagon on the farm when he was little, when he fell off and hit his head. He was severely injured and actually had to have a steel plate inserted into his head. Unfortunately, it's not known how Ken acted prior to this incident or if his behavior changed because of it. All we know is that from a young age, he was a horrible child and he never really left that phase. It was also said that when Ken was older, he had another accident where he was working on a construction site when a heavy steel beam dropped on him, left him severely injured. He had severe chronic pain, including headaches, and it was theorized that with both of these accidents, they could have contributed to his violent behavior and lack of empathy if his frontal lobe was damaged. However, for all we know, he could have been born this way and the injuries could have made it worse, or it could have had nothing to do with it and he could have just seriously been born this way and those were just things that happened to him. But if this man attempted to kill 2 people, why are we talking about him as the victim? Well, that's because he would become the next target in town. It was said that the meeting in town happened and then ended right as Ken McElroy was leaving that bar with his wife Trina. Now, what happened next is the smallest of details because it's all that we have. You see, Ken and Trina would get into their pickup truck, and before they would leave, shots would ring out. This happened for 20 seconds, and Trina got out of the car and ran to safety, but Ken would be found dead. Officers arrived at the scene and began to question everybody in the area, and this was a lot of people who had just left this giant meeting. This was in broad daylight, yet no one said they knew a thing. They hadn't seen anything. Everyone said there was too many people around to know exactly who fired. But it was also said that no one called for police or even tried to help Ken besides Trina. Forensics showed that at least 2 different guns were used because 2 different shell casings were found. This was thought to be a .22 caliber Magnum rifle and an 8mm Mauser. 3 shots had been fired in total, 2 hitting Ken in the head. Now, the engine was still running when officers got there because they had to find the scene themselves. No one had called. All witnesses that were around the area were released because they said they knew nothing. They went home in a more peaceful state than they had been in a very long time. Because you see, their town bully was gone. No more terrorizing was going to occur. However, 2 weeks later, with no leads to this killer, Trina told a grand jury that she knew who the shooter was. She said that it was the owner of that bar they had been at named Del Clement. Yet there was no physical evidence. Del said he had nothing to do with it. No one could corroborate her story, and so he couldn't be charged. No one else testified, and there were 3 separate grand juries, but no one was charged. Now, the FBI were also called in to help, and yet this case is still unsolved. Bo's daughter said, "It was not the kind of justice they should have gotten. We stood up and did the right thing. We went to police, we went to the courts, we went everywhere we could, but justice would stay delicately out of the way. Looking back, the justice system had as much to do with killing Ken McElroy as anyone in Skidmore did." Now, in 1984, Trina actually filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Skidmore for $6 million, but they actually settled this for $17,600 instead. Now, in 2012, she actually passed from cancer. But it was said about her husband, Ken, he had a legendary status, and it all got to be bigger than he was. Somebody would hear his name, and the legend grew bigger. When he got off on a trial, it grew even bigger. It went beyond just hammering people and being mean-spirited. He neutralized an entire criminal justice system. Still to this day, no one is talking. Do you believe they don't really know who did it? Or was it the fact that this meeting It was about more than just community activities. A book has been written about this case by a man named Harry McLean called In Broad Daylight, and he said, "You don't have a town full of people who were hiding a guilty conscience. They were witnesses. It really is that it was just never spoken of. They had an instinctive reaction to close up. A lot of them didn't even tell their wives and children. They just went stone silent." And it's true, because not even the FBI could get these people to crack. 39 years later, and it seems to be a town that got away with murder. But they were also said to be survivors themselves. These people were tortured and living in fear every day, all because of one man who nobody did anything about. Should they have gone to murder? No. Of course not. Murder is never a good thing. It's never a good backup plan or the main plan. However, I could see how some would say that it was in self-defense. In self-defense of an entire town that trembled at the sight of him, who had to look over their shoulder to make sure he wasn't there, who survived a man who should have been put away a long time ago, who asked for help time and time again and received nothing. I think Bo's daughter said it best when she said justice failed everybody. It failed McElroy too, because it failed to protect him from himself. The justice system just crashed and burned over this case. And that is pretty much all we know about the town that was said to get away with murder, however, also a town that were said to be made up of victims and survivors. I'd love to hear what you know, not what you know. Well, I mean, if you do know anything, please contact the police, but I would also love to know what you think about this case. If you think that it is the whole town that keeps a secret, or if you think that they really don't know anything. And what in the world do you believe that meeting was about? Don't ever forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye.